Right, morning everyone. Hopefully you can all see my screen and my wonderful marketing team are letting everyone in. So good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I think we've got a good number to start. I've got quite a lot of content to get through. So and it's hot, isn't it? So I won't hang around too much. There's a couple of people in the lobby actually, so just give it a minute, and then we'll get cracking. Right, okay. Well, let me do introductions first. So I'm Andy Slater. Hopefully you can see my slides. I work for Node4, so you might see the terms visual, Node4, you might already be a customer of visual. So just to explain that, so Node4 group of include visual, Tisky, the Nav people. So maybe you're a customer in one of the other areas, or maybe we're a new kind of supplier to you guys. Then the Node4 is the group. So my role at Node4 is I'm practice director for cloud. We're looking into Windows and SQL Server into Azure today. So I really owned a data platform company that I sold to Node4. So we did loads of work on SQL Server migrations to cloud platforms, and then we were acquired. Well, it's about 6 years ago now when I set up the Azure practice in Node4, and since then we've kind of had Visual as well that joined the group as an expert MSP. So hopefully I've got enough experience and knowledge to impart some of that onto you guys today. I've got quite a bit of content. So this is sponsored by Microsoft. And you know, a lot of the content has been just kind of standard Microsoft stuff that you hopefully covering enough areas of SQL, and we'll go through that today. I know it's hot. I'm hot. I'm sat upstairs. All the windows are open. Yesterday I had a call and I had a blue tit fly in, and I had this crazy bird flying around. So today I'm pre-prepared. I'm armed with one of the kids' nets just in case that happens. But I'm really hoping that we can just keep the focus on SQL Server. Right, so let me make a start. If we go and have a quick look at the agenda. There's a few different areas that I want to cover. We're trying to keep the focus and bring it back to SQL, migrating, benefits of Azure. I'm going to touch at the start on general market trends. Hopefully that'll resonate with you, and obviously everyone's got their own experience of what's happening in their own market. We're going to focus then on where's the value within the different Azure product set, what you can leverage for Windows and SQL Server migration. So we're looking at, you know, how we get discounts to different services, offers, you know, how you get really effective cost savings and onward benefits and value from moving to Azure. Then we're going to have a look through security services, different offers that hook in with SQL Server. We're going to talk about hybrid because you know, it's quite a big passion of mine, but a lot of this technology is available on-prem as well and outside of Azure. I'm going to touch on how that works, and then really just some of the next steps to get started. So if you're already in Azure, hopefully there'll be bits that we cover today that you might give you a little light bulb, or that it's nice to recap on what's there and what's available. Or if you're looking to move to Azure or one of the hybrid platforms, then you know, we've got lots of information. If you can take away one thing that you know, adds a bit of value to your day, then that's great. So thank you very, very much for giving up an hour of your time to this. Make sure it's valuable. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and let's go through the content. So yeah, let's just quick start about the market, because I've been working in IT since 1997, and you know, I thought, oh, you know, we've had this whole cloud modernization, microservices, PaaS, you know, moving to AKS, Kubernetes, and then all of a sudden, you know, ChatGPT, AI comes along, and well, you just feel like, wow, there's another massive you know, learning curve and opportunity as well. I watched a seminar the other day, and it was talking about kind of new application models where you've got a very natural language front end, like a chatbot or whatever, and then this kind of you know, intelligent AI engine behind that then is going to become, you know, a new approach to building applications. So there's a lot to keep it on top of today. Thankfully, it's like, let's go with kind of, you know, SQL and taking advantage of public cloud services. So some of the trends that we've talked about, we've been moving customers to public cloud for many years. There's still lots of customers on that journey. I think it's a never-ending thing. There's new services being created. To be honest, it takes a long time to execute and modernize for the public cloud. It's quite an easy, I say easy thing. It's a relatively straightforward migration path to lift and shift, but to get the real benefit, you've got to take advantage of all the good stuff and architect for the cloud. We have got a lot of moving parts with AI. So obviously within the Azure ecosystem, you've got self-hosted ChatGPT, OpenAI, Copilot, all these other wonderful things, and we have got more and more customers adopting those. I would say the biggest use case we've got at the moment is customers looking at corporate search. So obviously you've got all this data, and you want a chat interface to say, can you find this, create this report out of this customer data? So things like Bing Chat Enterprise we use internally, really, really good for that. We've really as well, reliability and security is a really big opportunity to improve with the public cloud. If you think about Azure, you've got UK South with 3 availability zones, aka data centers. You've got the ability to really capitalize on the HA topology by pinning various servers to different availability zones, and then you've got DR to UK West. So there's so much capability. It's an absolute moving target. I think this slide was probably written about 1 or 2 years ago. If I wrote it today, there'll be a much heavier AI element to it. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the main areas we've talked about. So in terms of why customers migrate and modernize to the cloud, one of the biggest things is obviously you've got this requirement, really a kind of inbuilt need as an IT function to try and optimize your tech investments, and that's a real kind of rolling agenda that you've got to keep. You've got this permanent move of this maintain budget with legacy systems, trying to move that forward, free up spend, innovate. We've talked about resiliency, the capabilities that we'll touch on today about inbuilt and baked in security compliance give you a really big kind of bonus to your business case. And then, of course, we're using all these inbuilt services, to really drive innovation and agility. At a basic level, the capability to drive infrastructure as code gives you massive agility, but also all the services when you're in Azure that you can just tap for a small amount of cash per second or per transaction. You just got this real level playing field now that everything's available on a consumption basis. So these are some figures from Microsoft. Everyone will have their own view. I think they came out of a report from Forrester, these first 3, which were interviews with Microsoft customers, and this last one's come from IDC. I think you have to work hard to try and get these numbers, I would say. They are real. Obviously, they've come out of interviews, but things like a 400% ROI, means, I think, as we go through this deck, you've really got to leverage the platform for what it's designed to do. You've got to lean on Microsoft around funding programs and, ease that migration burden, of kind of those one-off costs to drive a better return on investment. But absolutely, if you get the migration and the modernized operating model right on a public cloud, you really can make some massive impacts on kind of overall financials for your digital business in your own organization. So what I want to talk through really is we're going to go through this in 3 sections. Like I said, we're going to talk really why obviously we've got Windows and SQL Server, they're Microsoft software products, and if you're like me, I've worked with kind of Windows and SQL for a long time, you'll see now all the new tech is coming out first in Azure. So it's really it's really obviously, as Microsoft develop their technology, the benefit of actually running in Azure or an Azure integrated platform, adds this real kind of value, and everything gets baked in from security. You'll have seen in SQL Server, over the last 10 years, Azure's kind of slowly made its way into SQL for, backups and failover DR and all these different elements that you can now integrate with just on-prem SQL Server. So let's touch on the value side first, and I'm going to go through quite a few bits of information here around all the different aspects of value. Glass of water, because I'm hot. Okay, so let's look at Windows Server workloads. And if you're doing a lift and shift migration, or you're looking at moving Windows workloads into Azure, we can look at some of the basic kind of things that you can get through Azure. So the first one really is auto manage. So within Azure, you've got the ability to create a whole range of kind of automation runbooks and the ability to auto manage services. A lot of customers use this to do automated patching, things like that. We're going to have a quick look at that in a bit. One of the great kind of releases recently has been the latest version of Windows Server. So you can get an Azure Windows Server version. And the latest version, you can run this on your on-prem on Azure Stack HCI, or you can run it in Azure, of course. It's hot patching. So hot patching is really, we all have this problem whereby you've got a server, you need to patch it on a monthly basis, you need to take it down and reboot it. Well, hot patching removes that. There's basically a zero reboot requirement for doing that. So where you've got that SQL Server, or you've got that critical server that maybe you've not been able to invest in a cluster to gracefully swap over the cluster node, then hot patch is available if you can get onto the latest OS. There's a great tool within Azure called kind of Whacking Portal, Windows Admin Center. So you can effectively get the same experience in Azure for managing stuff outside of Azure. It's really good if you want to align operations. So you want one team hitting the Azure management pane to then manage the estate, and there's various capabilities built in that. .NET support for app services and Kubernetes. I've got a slide next really on app services and just explaining how they work and just touching on the detail there. But there's benefit of moving into some of the PaaS services. We're going to talk about security. I'm going to touch on Azure Virtual Desktop as well, because that's a really exciting area. And then of course, we're going to go into the Azure SQL options. So yeah, I mean, look, this automated patching, hot patching, there's some real off the bat operational benefits straight there for just moving Windows servers straight into Azure. So just a quick note on app services. So app services, if you're not aware, within Azure is effectively a PaaS service for running web, for running code on web servers effectively. So if you've got I don't know, a bunch of web servers and they're running on, I don't know, Apache or IIS, and you want to move them into a PaaS service, so you don't have to worry about the operational maintenance of that. You get really good benefits, like it's easy to do test and dev runs, and you've got this scalable service that you manage as a service rather than having to worry about all the the patching and the orchestration. It's a very simple GUI to be able to kind of scale and both up and down your kind of web infrastructure on a PaaS service. So it really is a good way to offload some of that operational burden for managing web and application infrastructure. Okay, so let's have a chat about Azure Virtual Desktop. I don't know if anyone here is using it or have used it. So if you're using RDS or Citrix or an environment like that, we've found Azure Desktop is it's a kind of modern operating model for providing virtual desktop infrastructure to customers. So it's a PaaS service, but it's with IaaS elements. It's kind of like a hybrid environment. So the way that Azure Virtual Desktop works, just to explain, is that the user will hit a front end in Azure, so a little bit similar to when accessing Office 365, but this is very much you have to build it yourself rather than a off-the-shelf service. So they'll sit and then they'll connect to a host pool of servers. So the way that Azure works is that you've got this auto scalable massive host servers for customers connecting in, and that really gives you a great capability that's very difficult to represent on premise. So a really good example is you've got 1,000 users, they're all using RDS or Citrix. You've got this massive server farm sat there that 9 o'clock everyone logs on, and then it gets, really hot. And then all of a sudden, come 5 o'clock on a Friday or in the evening, it's not in use. So Azure Virtual Desktop is a really good way to get that cloud economic benefit, because you only pay for the server when it's in use. So you can orchestrate different clusters, different capability, and it's the only place where you can get kind of multi-session Windows 10 and 11. If you imagine a normal virtual desktop server, you've got a server that you're then virtualizing the server operating system. So with Azure Virtual Desktop, you virtualize the guest, the kind of the Windows 10, Windows 11 experience. There's loads of capability. I could do a full hour on Azure Virtual Desktop. It is integrated with a product called Azure Stack HCI. So this is available on-prem for that scaling of host pool element to it as well. But it has to sit on that specific virtual platform. There's loads of capability, really integrated with 365, so you can get a really great experience. So if you've got a bunch of Windows servers or that are offering virtual desktop, this is a great way to get some value out of moving to this service. So let's have a quick talk about options for SQL databases. So there's 3, maybe 4, or 5 even actual different options for SQL Server. So the first thing is, obviously, if you've got a SQL Server and maybe it's not ready, or you don't want, for whatever reason, to move it into a PaaS service, then you can just pick it up and move it into Azure, and you can start getting some of the operational benefits of sitting on a modern platform. Some of the reasons where you might want to do that is a lot of the PaaS services don't provide things like SSRS, reporting services, integration services. So you might have a heavily customized SQL Server that you just want to move in. Might be a commercial decision, but effectively, you can obviously pick it up and move it. So Azure SQL Managed Instance is effectively a set of instances, or an instance of SQL that is managed as a PaaS service. So you've got a differentiation here, whereby you've got these 2 PaaS services option. You've got Azure SQL Database, which I'll touch on, but that is specifically a per database service. So most people will have an instance and it'll be running multiple databases. So managed instance is where you keep parity with that instance model. So you operate the PaaS services at an instance level. That's really useful if you've got codependent databases, like doing cross-database queries, things like that. You need to, this is the most compatible option if you want to move it first into PaaS services. And Azure SQL Database is a per database model. Now, there is a concept within Azure SQL Database of pools, so you can have an elastic pool of databases. So effectively, you can group them together, and it's a better commercial model. Most customers are now buying it on a kind of vCPU model. There's also an option for DTU, which is database transaction units, which you need a bit of a university degree to work out how that's going to play out. But effectively, you can pick a database up and move it onto Azure SQL Database. There is another option which is serverless. So serverless is very much a kind of point in time service for when you need a database engine. So you pay for the time that it's handling the queries and that it's in use, rather than having something there permanently. It can get quite expensive, but maybe you've got some kind of quite, I don't know, transitional needs that maybe for, I don't know, 4 days a month or whatever, you need to stand up a database and, do a certain amount of activity and then tear it down. So it's effectively the same as your SQL Database. It's just a different commercial model. And one thing I'm going to touch on later as well is there's a technology called Azure Arc, and we'll go for it later, but you can run Azure SQL managed instances on-prem with Azure Arc, which is quite exciting, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. So they're the 3 main options: lift and shift, have a PaaS service for a managed instance, or Azure SQL Database, which is typically the way that most customers go if you're trying to modernize. But obviously the big thing here is, is the application vendor or owner going to be happy to support an application that runs on this? That's always the challenge you get if you've got these different third-party apps, and in their documentation they don't say, this supports Azure SQL. So that's maybe why you have to default back to one of these options. Right, so Azure SQL, so if we take a closer look at that, moving the database model, the biggest benefit is that you don't have to worry about the operational uptime and availability. You're buying an SLA for the service, not the components. Like, you're not having to buy a server and get an SLA. So the SLA is for the availability of your data platform. So Microsoft will handle all the patching. It's fault redundant, and within Azure SQL, you've got different options to set the redundancy model. So you may want to, and there's a different SLA with that. So effectively behind the hood, under the hood, it does use kind of availability groups or that kind of methodology in the inner workings. So you'll have replicas, so you can choose to have different replicas of your database. And you can have it cross-site. You can, there's loads of different options there. But effectively, you're more of a consumer of a service rather than have to worry about, right, I've got an AAG, I need to set up a list now, and then I need to work out how to, do all the maintenance and operation on that. So Azure SQL, you'll get a massive, if you've just got instances that are running a handful of databases, or so you get enterprise edition features within Azure SQL. So you probably sat there and you're right, I've got an AAG cluster and I've got 2 servers there, and I've got DR to a 3rd site. That's really expensive from a licensing perspective. So you can have some real kind of price performance benefit by moving it over to Azure SQL. And we're going to touch on in a bit the security elements. So yeah, there's a lot to cover there from an Azure SQL perspective. Now, as you might imagine, because Microsoft obviously, own all the technology here, surprise, surprise, the cheapest place to run your SQL, server operations is on a Microsoft platform. Now, let me just explain these because, this is what Microsoft benchmark. It's up to you to decide what the capability is. So this example, if you look here in the notes, it's using Azure Hybrid Benefit, which I'll touch on in a bit. But Azure Hybrid Benefit is if you've got an EA agreement and you're paying for software assurance on your SQL Server environment, and you've got a load of cores that you license for, you can use that to go into actually Azure SQL or Azure SQL managed instances and use that as a commercial benefit, and it gives you massive savings on moving that in there. And obviously running SQL Server on Azure, you get lots of inbuilt stuff. I'm going to touch a bit later on how you can actually migrate an RDS SQL instance into Azure SQL as well. Right, so one thing that's really, really topical at the moment that we're getting asked by loads of customers is end-of-life support. Everyone's having to deal with it, I think, unless you're really on the ball, especially about Windows Server 2012 and R2. So hopefully you're aware, and if not, surprise, October the 10th, 2023, this year, so Windows 2012 goes into extended support. We've already got SQL Server 2012 that's end of life, and we've got to be really mindfully aware that we're managing risk around these operating environments, and obviously you've got the option then to buy extended security updates if you're on-prem, and you've got one of these servers that you just can't grade because the application provider's just taking forever, or they've gone bust, or there's lots of different scenarios whereby people just get stuck. Then obviously you need to invest in extended security updates, which is not cheap for sure. So one of the commercial benefits as well, which you're probably aware of both for Windows and SQL Server, is if you pick that workload up and you migrate it to Azure, the security updates are free. So if you've ever gone through that process with Microsoft of doing an economic assessment, well, they'll come in, they'll have a look at your workloads, and we did these as well. This is kind of a big saving, especially now. It's really a good line in the sand. And you get free security updates for Windows 2012. Now, I must absolutely say as well, as I will keep reiterating, this is available as well free of charge on Azure Stack HCI. Now, I'm going to talk about that later, but Azure Stack HCI is like a Hyper-V integrated operating system. So VMware equivalent, if you will, that you can run in your data center. And we've got a big uptake of customers who aren't ready to move to Azure, but they're feeling quite a bit of pain like this, and building Azure Stack HCI kind of environments just to kind of mop up to mitigate this, just because the price of the extended updates is a really good way to kind of have that drive that modernization. So I'm going to go through just a few different options within Azure. It's quite complicated. Frankly, there's a lot of stuff that's a pain in the ass to get your head around, but I'm just going to talk through these different options. So the first one I've touched on, Azure Hybrid Benefit. If you've got an EA agreement or you're paying SA on your Windows or SQL Server operating systems, if you go into the Azure pricing calculator, you'll get a really good view on or even the pricing pages on the Microsoft website. You'll notice when, for example, if you run a Windows VM, a big chunk of the cost, and it's not cheap either, is per core as a Windows Server licensing cost. So you can totally negate that. You can exchange in some of your current SA entitlement for that. And it's the same with SQL Server. So make sure, even if you've got stuff in Azure, that you're maximizing that, because you don't want to double pay by having SA benefits and not really using the capability. So when you're in Azure and you're running a server for maybe all month, and you see that like that for the foreseeable future, there's a couple of options you can go for. Azure reservations is the common one. So an Azure reservation is whereby you have a server or a server family or a service. It could be Azure SQL, only available on the vCPU model, where you lock it in. So you say, I want a 1 or a 3-year reservation, and then you basically commit to an agreement with Microsoft for 3 years, and then your monthly cost for that is like a 36 for that payment, but you get massive discounts. So normally it's, I don't know, around 60% maybe on most of the VMs. You don't get the number licensing bit, so it's just on the actual compute. But that covers some of the storage account options, and it also covers Azure SQL as well, the vCPU version. So if you're on DTUs and you're using it all the time, have a look at the vCore option, because you can save a lot of money there. There's a new offer called Savings Plan. And that's effectively where you sign up to almost like a commercial commitment with Microsoft, and then you get a discount on some of the operating costs, and then that's there and it's set. There's not much you can do about it once that savings plan set up. Most customers use reservations. You can cancel and you can swap reservations. Think of it like a bit of a discount token. So if you've got a D series, I don't know, a D2 V3 series VM, you can exchange them within. It will try and automatically fit within that same family to make the most of these vouchers. You can trade them back in. If you cancel them, just be aware that there's a $50,000 maximum limit. We have had a few customers that have got caught out because they've gone for 3 reservations, and then after a year they've tried to change it, but they've had so much that so long-standing reservations that it's been difficult for them to drive that process. Just be aware of that. You got spot VMs, so you can go and Microsoft when something's not in use, it will automatically give you access to kind of like a load of infrastructure that's not in use, and Amazon do a similar thing. Dev test pricing, so if you've got an EA agreement, then you can have dev test pricing, so you got a really cheaper option for running your SQL workloads on for dev test environments. And then, we're looking at, unifying the tools within especially security is a big saving. We've got a lot. It's like with 365 when you've got an E3 or an E5 license, you look down at all the benefits and you say, right, okay, well, AV, well, we maybe use this, and web filtering, etc. It's the same within security. Obviously, the more capability. So if you've got RDS services, vulnerability scanning, you can make a big saving by some of the security services. And then obviously there's the free extended updates as well. One thing I would say is that you need, when you go into Azure, and if you're in there, you'll already understand this, it can feel, you need to have a really good governance and a FinOps, financial operations framework, because things can get out of control pretty quickly. And what I mean by that is, obviously it's great in Azure because you can spin up everything you want to, and things there at a touch of a button. But obviously trying to govern that, and within Azure you've got loads of capability that I'm not really covering today, but around Azure policy you can set budget controls, loads of stuff there, and you need to make sure that you've got those governance guardrails in place. Within Azure you've got access to Azure Cost Manager. I would say that it gives you an all right level of visibility. I always make this joke with some of my colleagues that we don't really talk to CFOs much before Azure migrations, but afterwards they're on the phone wanting all the detail about, coding projects and tagging and everything. So we as well as Azure Cost Manager, we've got our own third-party solution we use for that advanced reporting. So we can just create more visual, actually Power BI based reports, and really get deeper into that FinOps operation. But Azure Cost Manager is there for free out of the box. Right, let's have a touch on security. Security, number one, number two agenda on most people's item on most people's agenda. It's a huge growing area for us. Every customer talks to us about security, and I guess the biggest concern at the moment is ransomware protection. We work on this approach of kind of prepare around kind of getting prepared, scanning, trying to stay on top of things, actively defending, and then responding to incidents as well. So we've got a whole security portfolio. But the tools we get within Azure, we've migrated a lot as an MSP, a lot of our tool into the Microsoft tool set, and it's just having all that pre-integrated intelligence, is really, really valuable, because we need to reduce the time to identify threats and then react to them in a coordinated way. So it's more critical, more than ever. So if we take a look at some of the areas that are relevant to this conversation, I'm going to talk a bit about Defender for Cloud and Sentinel. And so obviously when you're setting up Azure, you've got loads of different capability within the networking side. So you've got Azure Firewall, DDoS, you've got all the functionality within NSGs and capability. So it's a really well thought through security model in Azure, and that could even be from using services like Bastion for handling in remote access to servers, etc. There's some very specific SQL vulnerability and monitoring tools, so looking for suspicious behavior in the analytics of the data in the database. There's a set of tools around confidential computing to make sure that all data is encrypted at rest, in transit, across that whole operating model of Azure. And then, you get the ability with the extended security updates on your risk register to not have to worry about having a load of stuff on-prem or having to foot the bill for a load of additional extended updates. So let's just get deeper dive into a couple of these areas. Defender for Cloud is a fantastic tool. We've got lots of customers using this, both in the cloud and on premise. One of my favorite features, so Defender for Cloud is like a suite of tools. So you've got Defender for Servers, which handles, AV and all that infrastructure. But one of the greatest capabilities with Defender for Cloud is is around monitoring compliance and your security posture. So we'll touch on the SIEM service in a bit and how that integrates, but we get a lot of customers within Azure policy. You build up a set of policies and guardrails, and within Azure policy, there's something called initiatives. So an initiative is a collection of rules that align with certain standards. So you've got ISO 27001, you've got NHS, official data. Within there, there's loads of different initiatives. So what we have with customers is that they would apply that to that scope to both their external and internal operating environment. And that gives you a real-time dashboard through Defender for Cloud of compliance with those standards. It does vulnerability assessment, and it's that active threat protection on your Azure environment. So it really helps for you as or anyone really to sit above that that estate that you have to manage and worry about and manage all the risks, to get a really intuitive view on what's the, where are the issues, where are the problems, where are the compliance issues, just sucking up all that data and giving you a really nice, dashboard. And obviously you can integrate this into DevOps pipelines and make sure that it's baked in to anything. So, if a development team go and deploy a set of new infrastructure that, maybe is just done on a shadow model, the policy scope and the settings can automatically apply and adjust to that environment. So a really, really powerful tool. And we do various security seminars, but obviously if you, by trying to recreate that on site and on-prem is really, really, obviously you can use Defender for Cloud, but it's quite difficult. So working with the integrated tool set gives you some massive benefits. So if you dive down into what that does at a SQL Server level, even if you've got it on a virtual machine, that's where your main data is. That's where the crown jewels of the organization is, in terms of looking for suspicious activity, threat detection at that data level. So you've got running vulnerability assessments against SQL Server, and this is baked in as well to the PaaS services as well, and threat detection. So things like SQL injection attacks, where you've got specific targeted data threats that you really need to keep on top of. So the message is about, there's all this baked in capability that saves you having to run like a Nessus server and all the different elements to really try and keep on top of that threat landscape. And the gold tool in the box, the box really is something that we've moved over all our customers to. We're on various other solutions like forgot the Alien Vault, things like that, and we've moved everyone to Azure Sentinel. So Azure Sentinel is where you push all your logs, your data. It's the SIEM service that's capable within Azure. If you think about it in terms of managing threats, one of the main reasons Azure is a really good place to put your data is if you've got 365 as well as a user, you've got all that identity information. So who's logging on where, who's the movers, who's the leavers, blah blah's logged on from an IP in a country that it just seems a bit suspicious. So you've got all that user identity data, but then you've got all the server infrastructure, actual operational data about the all that application workloads. So Sentinel's the place where you ingest all that information. So you bring all the logs in there, and it's got an amazing AI engine, for doing threat detection. You can create your own kind of threat hunting book, kind of to look for specific threats within your organization, and that data is a really valuable place. So trying to get away from a situation where maybe you've got a third party that just goes, you get a report every month, or they go, oh, you got this problem, or you got this problem, and you got this, and this is where, you can start taking proactive action where you've got this fully integration. And that's the main thing, you need to have something that's got the deepest integration with the most amount of logs that we can collect with the biggest intelligence. So using all that AI capability within that, and there's I think there's something like 6.5 trillion signals a day that go into the engine that looks for threats. So Microsoft take it from Xbox and all these different factors. So you know, that threat feed, you can add your own threat feeds as we do as well. So really powerful SIEM capability that we use. We can give you demos on it. A really hot thing for customers to adopt. And I'm just going to touch as well on the if you have got just SQL VMs, you can use the automation technology to automatically patch. So you can get alerts around patching, and then you can kick off workflows to then do the patching, and then that will, you know, just need either an automatic reboot or someone to go in when the right time is to do that. But there's a great way, you know, you can pre-set up maintenance windows to do that. So it's a good way to, you know, if you think about operationally, you can, you know, you can process, you know, you can have everything documented and get the workflows and everything to do the work for you, rather than having a spreadsheet with, you know, someone from the team having to manually think about something and then do it and tick it off on the spreadsheet and stuff. So loads of capability there. So I'm going to touch now on what you can do outside of Azure. So we've touched on some of the things that you can do on the Azure platform, but what about some of the exciting technology you can do in your data center or our data center or at the edge or on-prem? You know, and what does that mean from a database perspective? So Microsoft, I don't know, I think they do a rubbish job about talking about what they do out of the data center. And I don't, you know, and I'm a big, you know, at Node4, we're a big advocate. We've got our own data centers, we've got our own Azure practice, so we get to see all sides of the equation. So there's two main elements really. I'm going to talk about a tool called Azure Arc. So Azure Arc, it's two things really. One thing, it brings a lot of the operational tooling and capability out of Azure to then be able to mop up your workloads outside of Azure. So you could have a load of servers sat on AWS. You could have them sat on an internal VMware platform. You can something called Arc enable them, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is like an agent that goes on the server. And then that brings all that information back into some of the technology we've talked about today. It allows you to manage it through the Azure Management Console. Really good way to standardize operations. The other thing Azure Arc does is that Microsoft have containerized a lot of their PaaS services, so Azure SQL, App Service, Functions, and Azure Arc allows you to run those technologies outside of a data center, outside of Azure. So imagine trying to, you know, if you've got modernized applications and for whatever reason, you know, you want to run it at the edge for, you know, making AI decisions at the edge, or you've just got a data center that's not ready to move, but you've got some projects that need PaaS services, well, you can absolutely do that with this technology. So Azure Arc enable servers. So the way this works, you've got an agent, it gets deployed on a server outside of Azure. So then that effectively, it sucks that information into Azure. So then you've got that governance policy over it. So that means you can do things like, you know, automate patch management, means you can do things like, you know, different Azure tools to, you know, like Monitor and all the various things to look after it. But effectively, it sucks all that, you know, information in about the operating system, and then it allows you to govern it from one place. So a user can come in and go and, you know, manage that server through Whacking Portal and visualize it, and everything can be coming into one place operationally. It's a great way for that. You know, if you've got that ISO 27001 policy statement, this is where most customers use it. You start deploying Arc on all the other servers, it sucks it all in, and then you've got one place to see your kind of, you know, kind of threat and risk landscape. Azure Arc enable servers, brilliant. For stuff outside, our main focus and most customers is Azure Stack HCI. So Azure Stack HCI is a hypervisor with benefits. So Microsoft have taken Hyper-V, Azure integrated it, and it's capable of running Azure Kubernetes service out the box. It fully integrates with Azure, and you get the benefits. So Microsoft view Azure Stack HCI as an Azure platform. So you get the benefits of free end-of-life security updates, hybrid benefit. A lot of customers are now looking at this to replace and modernize their internal data centers. You have to buy kind of pre-validated hardware, but you know, all the vendors do it. We partner largely with Lenovo, but Dell, HP, they've all got Azure Stack HCI services. Azure Stack Edge is a Microsoft managed edge device. Most customers we find just use the mini version of Azure Stack HCI. We're actually got project where we put it on ships at the moment with Starlink. It's yeah, you know, it's very capable to sit at the edge as well. And Azure Stack Hub, this was Microsoft's first offering. It's very expensive. I think if you in a, I don't know, a place where you've not got internet connectivity and you need to run an Azure experience, it might be the solution for you if you've got 200 grand to spare. But largely, I think a combination of Azure Stack HCI and Arc is like the way that most customers are delivering services today. So touch on the data services. So with Azure Arc enabled data services, effectively, if you've got a server environment, you can run a container platform on there like Kubernetes. So Microsoft have kind of unbundled their PaaS services, like I said. So you can run Azure SQL managed instances on a container platform in your own estate. So what are the benefits of that? Well, you get all that capability of you know, a PaaS service. You can start really small, so you can't on Azure. I think, you know, you've got quite a high core count to start with, but you can start with one vCPU, and you get the benefit of having that consistency of a PaaS service on your own infrastructure as well. And you know, the charging model includes all the licensing. It's run like a PaaS service, and you just need to make sure you keep that Kubernetes environment up to speed, and everything on top of that is managed through the Microsoft platform. Yeah, so just to touch on Azure Monitor, so if you've got Arc enabled servers, I've seen it on a few case studies actually where customers have justified part of that migration platform of adopting Azure Monitor, which is a really cheap inbuilt or cost effective, should I say, monitoring solution with Azure, and replace their internal monitoring solution. It's really configurable. Obviously, you can bring in everything outside with Azure Arc and everything on Azure, so it helps you. It does some really great pictures of seeing all the dependencies of the application. You know, you've got the ability to do that kind of correlation of X and Y equals Z, and you know, when you've got these instance and alerts coming in, it can automatically alert for you. You can create automated actions, and then you've obviously got the ability to mine that data, you know, through the tools and everything on Azure. So this is one of the things, is if we've got Arc and, you know, how you actually bring everything together, because if you're looking at moving to Azure, you don't want to be sat in a halfway house where you've got some stuff over here that's, oh yeah, we've got all this cool stuff in Azure, then we've got all having to maintain a VMware environment with a different tool set. There's an ability to bring that together from day one, give that observability, which is a word I don't use very often, you know, across the whole estate, monitoring, security, everything. So, and then obviously you've got a really good ability to configure dashboards, but you can pull data out to Power BI, all that kind of good stuff. I'm going to do 1 minute on Azure, VMware on Azure. Just did you know, customers largely use this when they're evacuating data centers at a really quick point in time. They've got a VMware estate. VMware on Azure effectively is taking the VMware management software and migrating your servers to dedicated servers or nominated servers within that are managed by Microsoft. So let's say you got a load of old hardware, it's all going end of life next month. You've got a VMware estate, you've not got time to do any modernization or move to Azure Stack HCI. You want to migrate and just run that VMware model on a load of servers that are provided by Microsoft. That's VMware on Azure. I'm only a fan of it for evacuating data centers because you don't really get the Azure experience because you're still running in VMware, but it's a great tool to do quick evacuations. Right, let's kind of go through really the next steps before I wrap up. Where most customers start when we're starting to get into the technical detail is, and some of you probably may have already used that, is a free tool called Azure Migrate. Azure Migrate is really good. You can deploy and apply it into your environment. It will then do the discovery, and then we'll start creating reports. One of the good things Azure Migrate does, it looks at accessibility of, you know, can this move to Azure? What are the problems? Are the operating systems supported? It will also give you financial estimates of, oh, this VM matches a, you know, a D series XYZ. And it also allows you to then manage that migration workflow. So Within, it's got ASR, which is Azure Site Recovery, which is like the replication technology built in. So you can then start to use Azure Migrate end to end. So you do that initial discovery, but then you actually use that as a tool to migrate in servers and operating environments. One thing that I would say is if you've got a third-party hosting provider, it's not always possible because sometimes it needs integration or agents putting on with the hypervisor. So just be aware of that. But we've got various approaches and different ways to look at that. There's also a ton of database tools. So one thing that you obviously need to look at is the compatibility of databases as well. So you've got the various kind of DMA tools within Azure Migrate, but you've also got the database migration service. So here you're looking at a schema, objects, data level. So where Azure Migrate, looks at largely the lift and shift. What you get with Azure Migration Service is the ability to pick up something. Let's say you've got an AWS RDS SQL environment and you want to move it to your new Azure SQL. You can use the database migration service to look at the schemas, objects, and migrate those with the data across. So it's a lot more in-depth data level tool, and this you'll get full compatibility about all the different compatibility settings on your database, and you get a lot more detail on it'll say, for example, are you doing cross database queries, so this database won't work in Azure SQL. So you get that granular level of database assessment. Really good. So I think this is quite a high level flowchart, but I think, look, this is a Microsoft slide, but you've got lots of different options on what you can do. I think the main thing is that the main message I would like to get across is you get the benefits and value from moving to Azure if you modernize for the platform. Try your best not to do a big lift and shift, because I think you've got to really take advantage of the technologies and stuff. If you just pick it up and move it, you're just taking all the problems with you, and actually you might not get the returns you're expecting. So have a look if there's a business case. Typically we're finding most customers have to be hybrid at the moment. There's always 60-70% of stuff that's we can move up to Azure, that makes business sense, but then there's a set of services as well that we think actually we could probably do it, but it's actually there's not the business case to move it. So we've got a great ability of building these hybrid platforms. So within our data center, we've got Azure Stack HCI compute services, so you can bring it onto that for the stuff that doesn't make sense. But effectively, at a database level, you need to assess things like, it's not just a SQL server. Is someone using SSIS? So do we need to look at Data Factory? And you've got these various options that you can bring through. But even if you've got on-prem services, you can still get PaaS services. You can still get this Arc enablement. If anyone's not aware of it, have a look at the Cloud Adoption Framework and also well-architected frameworks on the Azure website. There's a really good end-to-end I was part of a team that did a lot of the kind of proofreading of it, but effectively there's a whole what I call system which covers everything you probably need to move from A to B and then operationally manage it. So it's not just kind of guides on how to do things, but it's templates for like running a cloud center of excellence. There's spreadsheet template. There's all different kinds of assets in there that you can that cookie cutter that you can move in there. So have a look at the Cloud Adoption Framework if you haven't looked before. The Azure. So one of the things, and there's a little bit of change at the moment because Microsoft's resetting some of the funding, but you absolutely need to make sure you maximize the funding and the incentive opportunities from Microsoft. Their main program is called AMP, which is Azure Migration and Modernization. And for that, we can get funding which will typically cover most of the migration capability. So there's a little calculation that Microsoft do on how much you're estimated to spend in the first year versus how much return they get for how much the funding will be, but typically, we can get a really good chunk of funding for handling migrations. We can get funding for doing discovery assessments, economic planning, for trying to work out how much things would cost in Azure. So there's a load of capability there we can get out of the box from Azure. So really, to summarize, certainly from this offers perspective, if we're going back through, I would say look at the cloud adoption framework to set your structure and understand what a typical process would look like, because most customers have not been through that Azure process before. Unless you've been in a different company, you're not going to have gone through that migration process before. Loads of information there. Lean on Node4. We've got loads of capability, and lean on Microsoft for all the support and services to get you there. And we can start by looking at Azure Migrate or an assessment to just see what is the art of the possible, how much are things going to cost, what's going to be a challenge, and then we can architect out from there. So surprisingly, I fitted a loads of slides and just managed to make it in time. I hope it wasn't too fast paced. I appreciate it's hot and there's just a big brain dump of information. The slides are going to be available after this, and if anyone's got any questions, then please feel free to raise them. I can't see the Q&A screen yet, but I can have a look. Can I just ask Sean or Molly to just kind of interject if there's anything there? If anyone's got a question, please.
Hello. So yeah, nothing's come through yet. So if anyone, like Andy said, if anyone would like to ask a question, please do. Or if you'd prefer, we can set up a meeting after the webinar. So please do let us know in the chat box.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I hope everyone found that really useful. It's difficult, isn't it, going through it all on one big chunky session. I think typically the best things are, like Sean was saying there, reach out to us, just arrange a bit of a meeting. Let's have a WebEx discussion, discuss what's important to your projects, your environment. Let's see, what all these different technologies, what are the best adoption technologies, what's right for you as an organization. It's just a huge monolith or just huge magnitude of stuff that you can take advantage of, but which is great because once getting those databases into Azure just opens up a massive opportunity around data warehousing, AI. It's all about data. So hope everyone enjoyed that. Have a great day, and follow up if you've got any questions. I appreciate everyone attending. Thank you very much.